very good evening. Distinguished participant on the dais, our host, distinguished participant in the hall, more importantly, the ladies, and of course, men, we are in the minority today, I believe. It's such a great pleasure and privilege to be in this wonderful forum today. Since this is a forum organized by women, I would like to quote one of our famous Afghan poets called Rumi, who says, "Woman is the radiance of God. She is not a creature, she is the creator." So there's a lot, just in a few words, of what constitutes women for us in the world. And moreover, I truly believe that women are a force to reckon with. And today's forum is the example of how much women does in our society. And I'm glad to note that women are taking their rightful place in the world. When women work, economies flourish. So let me go straight to the story of Afghanistan when it comes to the rightful place of women that they should have. We are working very hard to ensure that the women in Afghanistan also takes the rightful place that they deserve. And we have come a long way in the last 15 years at least to ensure that we are achieving the goals that we'll cherish as a nation in Afghanistan. And we have come a long way. Millions of girls in school today. Women shoulder to shoulder with their brothers in the rebuilding process of Afghanistan. In the business, hundreds of business councils are being led by women. Politically, more than 25% of women are representing Afghanistan in the parliament today. So I'm very pleased to share the hopeful story of Afghanistan in the context of how women are doing well in our part of the world. Now, coming to the topic under discussion, globalization. The world we live in has increasingly become globalized. But it is not a recent phenomenon. Yes, it has been accelerated in the recent past, and it is entering a new phase defined by the soaring flow of data and information. Let me give you an example of how globalization works. We here use US products made in Asia with parts assembled from various countries. Garments from Bangladesh, drink Italian coffees, French croissant, and yes, the Afghan dry fruits. This means that we are connected and intertwined as a globalized world. And definitely what happens in one part of the world has consequences for the rest of us. Now, coming to migration, as our other colleagues on the dais shared their experience of how migration worked in their countries. Migration is one of the most visible and significant aspects of globalization that we see all over. migration within countries and across borders. But certainly, migration, why it happens? Some may think of better employment, better opportunities, better lifestyle. According to a figure that I got today, international migrants have reached 244 million in 2015 for the world as a whole. So this has become a grand reality. And migration has ushered into the mainstream development policy. And as you all know, the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals includes migration. So there are types of migration. In the case of Afghanistan, we have experienced mixed migration. Immigration of refugees, asylum seekers, seasonal and permanent outflow of economic migrants, internal movements we call as IDPs, internally displaced population, and the return of Afghans who have previously sought safety abroad. In the last 15 years, after the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, we had millions of refugees out of Afghanistan. In the wake of the fall of the Taliban, we have a return of more than 5 million refugees back in our country. And of course, millions still remain out of Afghanistan, including many in Iran and Pakistan. Now let me come to the reason for why migration happened. Reasons, as I said briefly, include security, livelihoods, natural hazards, but conflict remains the most important feature of forced migration in the case of Afghanistan. And of course, we see the same migration happening in other regions, particularly in the Middle East, that we see in the case of Iraq and Syria. But what challenges migration bring along? And those are as follows in the case of Afghanistan. The challenges mainly in our case is the surge in migration of the educated youth, and we consider them as the future of Afghanistan. Unfortunately, in the last year and a half, we have had migration of the educated youth from Afghanistan. Moreover, as I mentioned earlier, the IDPs, the internal migration or the internal movements, we call them the internally displaced population. But certainly when people move within countries, the focus will be more on the urban centers. In Afghanistan, let me give example of the capital. The capital of Afghanistan, Kabul, is basically instituted for around 500,000 people. But today, because of the internal movements of the population, it accommodates more than 5 million people. So that is the challenge that it brings along when you see immigration or internal displaced movements within countries like Afghanistan. So it has made the challenge twofold. So what we are doing to address the challenge of migration within and abroad, the Afghan government has crafted a policy framework under the special ministry called the Ministry of Refugees. And that ministry has been focusing on refugees, the returnees, the IDPs, as I said, the internally displaced population, the economic migrants, under a range of projects, such as the capacity building program, border management, counter trafficking, community stabilization, disaster management, disaster risk reduction, and resettlement. And for the national IDP strategy, and we have a repatriation and reintegration policy and a high commission on migration. So these are the measures that we have to deal with the situation of migration, whether this is happening within Afghanistan or beyond Afghanistan. Our policy of refugees is guided by 5 priority areas called the Solution Strategy for Afghan Refugees. And that includes voluntary repatriation, access to shelter and essential services, livelihood and food security, social and environmental protection, capacity development. While dealing with the and as you all know, Afghanistan's geostrategic location as a connector, as a crossroad of region, is what we have been working on. And Afghanistan's potential as economic land bridge is what we have been working at least in the last 15 years, but this is traditionally what Afghanistan is, a country connecting the region, especially South Asia, Central Asia, and the Middle East. And I'm glad it's worth mentioning here today that part of our government plans to deal with issues of migration and other economic issues dealing with Afghanistan's potential, Afghanistan will be, together with India, organizing a conference in July under the theme of Make in Afghanistan. So we will, of course, be extending invitation to you as well to participate in that major event. As a connector, as I said earlier, Afghanistan with international partners, mainly with our regional partners, including India, we are working on projects such as the Chabahar. You must have heard in the news, and I'm very happy today to inform you that Afghanistan, together with Iran and India, has completed the technical agreement, and we are soon going to witness the signing of the trilateral transit trade agreement on Chabahar. Moreover, there are a number of other projects at the regional level where Afghanistan will be playing a major role, such as the energy supply, the CASA 1000, which was recently inaugurated in Tajikistan, and a project called TAPI, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India. And that project was also, after years of negotiation and discussion, was inaugurated later last year. So the impact of migration, coming back to our original topic under discussion today, the impact of migration on economic growth. Yes, certainly the impact of migration have pros and cons, but let me dwell on the pros. In the context of migration, speaking of the diaspora, which was mentioned earlier by our previous speakers, play a huge role in development of their home economies and industries. And of course, remittances is one of major item that comes under the diaspora, which are playing a role in their countries. But besides their remittances, their experience, their knowledge, their skills, the relationship they're making with other countries around the world, and the investment that they bring along with them. So it's very important to engage our diaspora, the talent that they have, and the expertise they have to bring along and use and invest in our countries. Other benefits include, especially in our case, are the diaspora community who have been educated and trained outside. In our case, we were lucky and fortunate to have a large number of diaspora returned after the fall of the Taliban to take part in the reconstruction of Afghanistan. And I'm glad to report that a large number of Afghan cabinet ministers today are part of the diaspora who returned to Afghanistan and participated in the reconstruction process. Our current president is part of the diaspora who lived for so long abroad and returned, and today he's working as the president of Afghanistan. major investment in Afghanistan as part of the diaspora. I'll give you a signature project of Afghanistan. $25 million Coca-Cola bottling plant in Afghanistan was funded by a group of diaspora. And today, that is one of the shining examples of the investments coming from our diaspora community in Afghanistan. So there is no any single formula. If you talk about migration and talk about how to manage migration, it depends. Different solutions have to develop in response to different contexts, as was the case in Afghanistan. Thank you so much.